Hello, my name is Mohit Deshpande, and in this course, we'll be explaining to you the user interface of our social notes application. So what we have here is the Dialog class. And what this shared dialog does is that it is the dialog that is presented to our users with two options where they can share to Facebook or they can share to Twitter. Now, I do have the functionality of the sharing to Facebook and sharing to Twitter. Those methods are in this class, but we'll get to them in another course. You can see here we have the tag used for logging purposes. We have a projection because we have a cursor object. And we have a context because we need to access the database, and the only way we can do that is by using a context and getContentResolver method. So you can see here in the constructor that we require a context, and we assign our local variable context to this variable passed in. Now, the dialog creation actually occurs in onCreateDialog. And we're given a bundle, a saved instance state. You can see we created a dialog object because this method requires us to return the dialog that we're creating. We have a cursor object here, and this is where we use the context. We use the context so that we can grab the content resolver and then query the database. We're seeing we're using our URI, our content URI, and not the system URI. If we were to change this to maybe a contacts URI, then it would query the contacts database. You can see we pass our projection. We want to retrieve these columns. And you can see this statement here is called the where statement, and it does what it says, in the sense that it only selects rows that meet this criteria, where the note ID is equal to, and this statement here, get arguments, you'll see in another course where we talk about the controller. What get arguments does is when we're creating this dialog, we have the option to, there's a method called set arguments, and then we would pass a bundle of values into this. Now, a bundle is similar to a map where you would have a key and then a value. You would have a series of keys and values. You can see we have only one. When we set the arguments, we only put in the ID. And what this does is this retrieves the ID from the bundle. You can see we're telling this cursor to move to the first row, and because of this where statement right here, there is only one row. It's safe to say that there is only one row. That is because in our database creation, we stated that ID was an integer, the primary key, and it was auto-incremented. This means that no two nodes can have the same ID. And what we have here, when we call cursor.getString, what we're doing is we're getting the value of a column, and this cursor.getColumnIndex tells the cursor.getString that we're looking for this column, and then we do the same thing for the content of the note. You can see we have an alert dialog.builder object, and this builder object is what helps us in creating the dialog. Now, an alert dialog is a subclass of dialog, which is why we can use it and then pass it back. You can always create your own dialog with your own custom UI, but an alert dialog is a very simple dialog that we can use right here instead of having to create our own dialog. We have a string array of providers, and I'll get to that in a minute. You can see we set the title to this r.string.dialog share. It was the resources. If we look in our package explorer here, anything in this folder is put in the .r file. The .r file is in this gen folder. And the what the .r file does is it keeps a series of constants and subclasses. You can see here's the main class, and we have a subclass string and a subclass array. What it does, the purpose of the R class is that you can integrate your other resources in the Java code without having to do something messy like call an open file stream. That's the purpose of this. You can see all of this is an XML or it's an image. Well, that's exactly what the resource class does. Is it creates a set of constants and tables so you can always be able to refer to these. And that's what we're doing right now. We are referring to this string dialog share, which is in our strings file right here. In this strings file, as you can see, we've declared many string constants. Now, as you become a more professional developer, what you're going to want to do is localize your application. You would create a string resources for a file for each language that you're publishing to. You can create one for English, for Spanish, for French. You can localize these strings to all different sorts of languages, and what this does is it opens up all the other countries in the world to your application. Maybe there are people in France who don't know English very well. What you can do is take your strings file and you yourself will have to translate them. You can give it to a translator who will do this for you, or if you're fluent in that language, you can do this yourself. You create another strings file, and what you can do is localize these strings so that those French speakers who don't understand English very well, when they open their application, the system is smart enough to choose the strings file that is native to the country, which is French in this case. Alright. And you can see here that we set the title of this dialog, and then what this method does, set items, is the dialog is a list view now. What set items does is it sets the items that are going to be in the dialog. Now, you don't have to have a dialog with a list. You can have a dialog with just plain text, in which case you would call builder.setMessage. You can see here the first parameter we have is the array, and I have declared it right here. Share providers, you see we have Facebook and Twitter.